All right, guys. Hey, welcome back. We got another episode, and we have Nate Carlisle in the studio today. And this is going to be an interesting guest. This is a guy that has brought in millions and millions of dollars into his business. He started it from nothing. He's now brought on more of his brothers and partners to be able to grow it because it's a huge company that's growing bigger and bigger. He thinks big. He's a guy that grew up here locally in southern Utah. And so this is somebody I'm excited to introduce you guys to. And I think there's going to be an interesting discussion because he's a very skilled person. And a lot of that came, I think, from your childhood. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. We are who we are largely by our childhood.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, so we were talking about this off camera. So I've always had the perspective, you grew up in Hilldale, I grew up in Santa Clara, so we're 40 minutes apart. The other thing that's similar is that I was raised in the LDS church and you were raised in the FLDS church. We share the same I think we narrowed it down to either the first 3 or 4 prophets at the beginning.
Yeah.
But at least for sure, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young. And then
John Taylor.
John Taylor probably, sure. And then after that, maybe one more. Anyway.
No, I think now that I think about it, it was after John Taylor that the breakup started.
Okay. So a lot of the foundational stuff, we share a lot of that, and we grew up in the same part of the world. I mean, if you think about how vast this world is, I mean, we're paper thin close to each other with very similar belief systems when you think about it. And so the difference though that I see that I really like when I look at people that grew up that I know, and I know quite a few people that grew up in Colorado City actually, and they're very industrious. It feels like the men were taught at a young age to work, like just work, but in like your framing, in commercial framing, but with construction in general, like any side of construction or landscaping or excavation, or is that pretty accurate? Or
yeah.
Change it if I'm not.
No, that's perfectly accurate. As a small community and everybody knew everybody, the first time I went on a construction site and doing cleanup, it was just in the community. We had a common practice in the community was Saturdays were for the community. And so we would go around and help out families that couldn't do their own thing would get put on the list for needing help that day for each Saturday. And so we would gather around, us men and boys would gather around and be sent to these different.
It was just expected.
Yeah, it was part of the practice. I mean, it was a day for us young men to look forward to. It really was. And there were some obviously that didn't want it, but for the most part, we looked forward to it. And
why do you think you look forward to it? I'm just curious. Let's just start there.
I've always loved perspective. I never liked to be sitting around at home or doing this, or I never liked parties. So there was 2 things going on at the weekends in that community: parties or working on other people's, helping out other people, their yards, doing an addition, a remodel, whatever you want to call it, yard work, whatever. And I was one of the ones that I just didn't, parties were pointless to me. So that's why I look forward to it. Just get out, get to know people, learn perspective, do stuff with my hands.
Yeah. That's cool. I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that you guys on Saturdays would go out and do that. And then when you say parties, like what were those like? Like picnics or like, food get-togethers, or what was that like growing up?
So towards the end of that community, and if anybody studies that community, they know what I mean by the end of the community. It was getting more and more shamed, but there was your partiers that would go take like what we do nowadays when there isn't a community. You take your side by sides and all that out on the sand and do all of that. Go out to the edge of the world, go to the Grand Canyon, go hiking up in our beautiful canyons. We live right by Zion's
National
Park, just stuff like that. That's what I mean by
it
partying.
Is pretty out there. Like Hilldale, I've always said, is very beautiful, in my opinion. If you go up closer to the mountains, like the red rock that they have out there, I think it's beautiful.
Oh, it is, and like I took it for granted.
Yeah,
all the time. But those were the kind of parties I'm talking about. It wasn't necessarily like there was some drinking and drug parties going on, but it was so shamed in the community, which it should be in my opinion. But it was so shamed in my community that those that were doing that it was pretty hidden, not public.
Yeah, which is pretty standard anyway. I mean, growing up LDS, it was the same thing. Like going to high school, were there members of the LDS church that were doing that stuff? Absolutely. But it wasn't like the church had anything to do with it. They were just members of it, you know, and then they were doing it in secret, you know, too. But in the world in Utah in general is that way, I think, probably.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, since you could say that I came out of the religion, I'd say 15, 16, not long before I started TecTon. And it was really just another community with a little different set of rules, a lot more strict, a lot more strict on expectations. But you go around Utah to these little tight-knit communities, there's a lot of similarities when you get to know how tight-knit they are, and like the expectations of the parents, the expectations of their leaders.
Sure.
You know,
let's talk about as a male, being a provider and being industrious. Because like I said, going back to how I see, like, you know, people come from Hilldale, Colorado City are pretty honest people in general. They're hardworking, all those things. What was that expected? What was expected of you? Was it, hey, go create your own business? Or was it you're expected to work for somebody? Are you all supposed to work for somebody within the community? What were the expectations from a young man, you know, from young age to then, hey, now you're more mature in your 30s and 40s and 50s? What was your expectation?
So the expectations was being industrious to a company that gave a lot, donated a lot. So it was very encouraged that way. I would say the expectation was absolutely go work for X company because they donate a lot to the church. So,
but it could be if they were outside of the community, as long as they donated, or it wouldn't make sense that very many people probably would.
We didn't have outside money coming in. It was inside. So if you were working for a company outside of that community, you were considered on the road out. Like you were about to leave the community.
So everything is kind of in-house.
Yeah, it was an ecosystem in itself. In large, like we went out, the crew, the young men, older men, we'd go out and build down here in St. George, really all over the country.
Yeah.
And bring that money in, and then at that point, it was just an ecosystem inside the community.
Yeah. So, well, let's say that you have an idea, something in construction as a young man, and you've had experience, and you're like, hey, I think we don't have this in our community. I'm going to go start my own business. Could you just go do that?
It was not encouraged.
Okay.
It was not encouraged, and didn't happen very often.
I'm curious to know why. I'm just curious, but more on the side of, let's say you're a young man, you're a young hustler. Let's say there's a need, right? There's a need in the community and outside, maybe just from, you know, evolution of our society, of our living.
Yeah.
Is that different? I would think that the leaders would probably be like, well, hey, we need this. This young guy has experience here. Let's let him start it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was more, and you're making my head spin a little bit. I never really thought that deep about that. But
I'm just curious. I really am just curious.
No, I have an answer for you, and that is it was all about making sure the profits came back to the community. So let's say that you were a son or a relative to the leaders, and you had that ambition. It was encouraged 100% because the chances of those profits coming back to the community, back to the leadership, it was a good chance. But me as really nobody, except for just a member, I would have never got the green light.
Gotcha. Somebody else may have.
Yeah.
But it would have been, okay, no, that makes sense. And then the church from there, as they get the money back in, how did you see that distributed? Was it they would let it stay with the companies to be able to help grow the companies? Obviously, there's got to be some of that to make your orders and get your materials and pay workers and all that stuff. But then as far as like making sure that everybody's needs are met, here's the other thing that if people don't know this, and I actually don't know if it's something that's brought up in yours, but we talk about the law of consecration.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar. And the reason I thought that you might, because I think it was Joseph Smith that talked about it, right? Like way back.
Yeah, he brought it to light.
Right? So that is the idea, right? At least how like I'm feeling and hearing that's probably why it's all the profits are going back.
Yeah,
not the profit, like the money.
Yeah, the profit.
I just said like the profit of the church and the profits. I can see how that can be confusing. Yeah. The money's coming back into the community.
No, I wish we could born that many profits. No, it was all about giving what you didn't need, absolutely need. And now the one important thing is it got this way in the mid to late 2000s. As far as like, it wasn't this way back in the 90s when I was born. It was a freedom. Like you had a lot more freedom to do what you needed and then turn money in as you could. Obviously, the 10% rule stayed in place. You'd just like the LDS, you turn in 10%.
A tithe.
A tithing, yeah. And then after that, it was turn in everything you don't need.
And that's the law of consecration.
Yeah, and it started tightening up when the leaders started branching out all over the United States, trying to build up other communities. Then they needed a lot more money. So at that point, a ton of pressure was put on every cent possible. So, and honestly, that's when it started coming undone. Too much pressure put on the business. There was so many businesses that went out of business because too much of that pressure.
Just because they couldn't afford.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have cash flow inside your own business, how are you going to survive?
Yeah, it's dead. Any business, right?
Yeah, 2008. I don't know this number, but I'll bet you 60-75% of the business failed because they didn't have any cash.
Wow. And that was right around the time that Warren was going through the allegations. 2007.
Yeah, he was caught in 2005. I believe it was 2005. And
he was in a truck, like he was driving
right
along the interstate
Vegas.
Or something, right?
Yeah, right outside of Vegas. He was caught in 2005. But they were still building the temple down in Texas, and I mean that community has, I'd put hundreds of millions of dollars into it that came from Colorado City, really? Hilldale.
Wow. Hundreds of millions, you feel like, from Hilldale?
I feel like between operation and everything they were doing, I think so.
Wow. That's crazy. Is that still a thing in Texas?
No, that was seized by the state.
Okay.
After all that fiasco down there.
Okay. So there's nobody out there anymore.
No.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually, weirdly enough, so I was a freshman in high school in 2007. I didn't know a lot of this until last year. Did I hear of Warren Jeffs? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did I know much about him? No. Did I know much about what the allegations were? No. This is a question that it's a personal, I'm curious, just because I'm curious to know, mainly because of my own religion.
Mm-hmm.
In LDS church, there's a declaration, official declaration number 2, in the Doctrine and Covenants. By the way, I don't know this question either. Do you guys have Doctrine and Covenants?
Yeah.
Okay, which I figured because Joseph Smith was the one that put those together, right? Official Declaration number 2, does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay, that's fine. So I don't think so either. So blacks in the priesthood?
No blacks, no.
Okay. So blacks in the priesthood were not allowed early on in the LDS, FLDS, whatever we want to call it. The early times of the church, we'll call it. And there's a official declaration number 2 where whatever prophet at that time, and I'm sorry I can't remember, basically said, hey, we've now received revelation that blacks can hold the priesthood. And there was some things at that time that I think were a little bit the U.S. government at the time basically flexed their muscles and said, hey, if you're not doing that, then we're going to make you pay taxes.
Discrimination and all that.
Discrimination and Emancipation Proclamation, all that. Convenient? I think so. I wasn't there. But in that same, this is where I'm getting my question. It's long-winded. Yeah. In the same declaration, basically says, by the way, I'm ad-libbing, a prophet cannot lead the church astray. Because if a prophet leads the church astray, God will remove him from his office. Mm-hmm. And that basically, to members of the church, basically means he'll be killed by God, he'll be removed, and he'll be taken, he'll just vanish, something will happen.
Yeah.
Because God will not allow his church to be led astray.
Yeah. Convenient for the church leaders.
That's how I kind of feel about it. However, I think that a lot of members kind of see it as like, well, they are human. And I hear this a lot, that, well, when he's speaking as a man, he's speaking as a man. But when he's speaking as a prophet, he's speaking as a prophet, and he's never wrong there.
Yeah. And
I'm like, how do you distinguish the two? You know, I kind of have a hard time with that one. Okay, my question is, that's how I feel about my side and how I was raised, is I go, I don't think that's safe. I don't think that's safe for me, even when President Nelson, and he didn't force anybody to do this, but when he basically said, hey, I highly encourage people to get the COVID shot. Yeah. I wasn't like for, against, hardcore either way. I just, when he said it, I was like, not for me. Like, I don't care if the prophet said, and I heard so many people though in Utah say, well, I don't really know, but the prophet said to get it. I'm like, no, he really didn't. And you're just going to go blindly believe because a man said to do that. Well, he's the prophet. Yeah, but like you know, and now I have a friend that's 23 years old that got the Johnson & Johnson shot, and he has myocarditis, and he almost died. And I've had 2 friends that have died from the shot. They're young, in their 30s. And I have 2 others that almost died but caught it right in time, and now they'll be on medication the rest of their life. Wow. And it came from either a mission president that's home to get it or a church leader. And so I'm like, okay, that, like, to me, my gut feeling was right. I haven't even asked the question. Question is, how do people feel in general? I'm sure there's difference in opinions, and maybe your opinion is what I'm really asking for. After Warren Jeffs got accused of the things that he got accused of and got thrown in jail, what is the common feeling among people in the church?
Well, the easy answer is, if they consider themselves still in the church, he's done no wrong. My mother's one that she strongly believes that he is still the one man. You know, he is still the prophet, and he's done no wrong to her. Like it's she hasn't even seen the evidence. There are some few that are so stuck on the fact that he can do no wrong and he'll never lead us astray, that he has dementia, the worst dementia ever right now, sitting in prison. His health is so terrible.
Really?
And they're still trying, like there's a big portion of them still trying to take orders from him. Like,
really?
He makes no sense, and you can see that in every revelation. Like in one paragraph, he'll repeat himself like 10 times.
That's like trying to take orders from Joe Biden.
Yeah. Like. Oh no, that's so true. That is so true. I didn't think of it that way. It's like Joe Biden in prison. How would that be?
Well, I think it'd be great, but aside from that, I'm gonna get some freaking AI is gonna catch this on my podcast and throw me on the hate list. They're gonna cancel my podcast.
Yeah, they are. Well, nice thing is I'm here. I was here at your last podcast. That brings up a point. The way you explained the LDS is so much. It's so much how we were. Like, it's like they said it, we must do it.
Yes.
I don't differ from my father very much, but my father was LDS.
FLDS?
He was LDS.
And then converted to FLDS?
He converted to FLDS.
That's rare.
Yeah, no, he I think he was one of the last ones that ever did it. He did it in the late 60s. I believe late 60s, early 70s. And I don't differ from him because I am who I am because of my bloodline, I believe. Like there's a lot of traits that way that you're
serve
born
you.
with. The question is, are you going to put it to work?
Right.
And he was just looking for something different. He found something different. One of his comments, and there's history of him saying it inside the LDS and history of him saying it inside the FLDS. When the prophet says it, you just have to believe.
Just do it.
Just do it. So in that same sentence,
did you guys have the song "Follow the Prophet"? Follow the prophet. Did you have that?
Yeah,
we did too.
Yeah, that was. I remember that back in old grade school.
We had that as kids. Yeah, growing up. Well, he knows the way.
Yeah.
It's like just follow.
Yeah, just buckle up.
Just do it.
Do it. There is so many similarities that it kind of gives me PTSD at times. Like I come out of the FLDS and I have a lot of great friends, business associates, customers that are LDS, and I'm just like, you're so much similar. I mean, obviously you got so you talked about the declaration. I'm not really getting off subject here. You talked about the declaration. We never ever seen that because our theory is that back when John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff split and decided they were both the prophets, that's my interpretation of it. But it was like 1890 or something like that.
Okay, I don't know.
We were not supposed to read the Doctrine and Covenants or the Book of Mormon that was printed after
that time.
So we were actually living, when it come to doctrines of the church, we were living that far past.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but as you said in the beginning, it's so similar.
It is
in the ground roots.
Mm-hmm. And both sides are pointing fingers saying we're the right one, they're not, vice versa. We have the priesthood, and the other side saying we have the priesthood.
Yeah.
Interesting time. It would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall at that time.
Yeah.
To see how it all worked.
The problem is, what would have been fun is to have friends and be an outside looker in, but have friends deep in both sides.
Yeah. And
just see the similarities. I think you'd find that the only difference really is the polygamy, and this is before year 2000. After the year 2000, the leaders, they went off the wall. Mm. They went clear off the wall.
You felt it.
That community up.
You felt it.
I was too young to feel it that time. That's me looking back, and hearing my big brothers, my elder friends that were in that area. Yeah, after the year 2000, when Warren came into power, something got into him. He screwed the opportunities, the community clear up.
You seen that show on Netflix at all, the Keep Sweet documentary, Warren Jeffs?
I haven't. I've seen. There's one on Peacock, I think.
I'm sure there is, and maybe it's the same one. I think I've heard of two.
I haven't seen that one. There's another one on Peacock, I believe, that I've seen.
I find that one a little bit interesting. That was I probably watched that a year or two ago with my wife, and that I think was the show that helped me see. Wait a second here. I'm pointing my fingers at these guys saying How could they do that? That's so crazy. How could they have multiple wives? How could they just give all their money to the church? How could they? And then when I really break it down, watching that show made me realize, wait a minute, I'm not that different.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I'm right, and they're saying they're right. And I'm like, and so it really has helped me grow so much in the last couple of years in the perspective that, wait a second here. You know, there are millions and millions of people on this earth right now, right? A couple billion.
Yeah, there's 7 billion plus.
But then you think about how many billions of people have come to this planet. And then now let's take this small time in history where Joseph Smith came and started the church, and then it broke off once, right? And there's another group, something too, but a couple.
Yeah,
anyway.
A couple.
But I'd say we're like the main two. What is the possibility that it all really happened, that we weren't there, and that it was completely true? Well, it's possible. It is possible. What's the chance that it's probable, though? Well, it's not very probable. As far as numbers go, it's not very probable. So you have to have a lot of faith that you're right. But what I've realized is that every religion says, well, we're right. Except for the non-denoms, except for the non-denominationals. They're just like, we're just here to sing praises and teach. Yeah, you know. And so I kind of looked at that and I said, wait a second here. Let me step back and let me question some things, you know. And as I've started to question things, I feel like I think the healthy thing about it, and I still can go to church on Sunday, and I still have a temple recommend, and I still have these things. But what I think I've gained from it is perspective, that I don't think it's smart to just blindly follow anyone in any aspect, because at the end of the day, we really are just men. We are human, and that's just me. That's how I feel.
There was definitely very clear in our society, just like you're saying, like you have people, to put it bluntly, that are following these I'm going to say teachings blindly, because everybody takes everything different. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all about perspective.
It's all perspective.
And really what fits you. Like for
and
me,
fits your
what
story.
fits me is not doing everything they want. You know, like understanding their teachings a little different than the next guy. Following the spirit of the word rather than the word itself, so to speak, is one of the sayings that that was around before Warren came into power. Was just like follow the spirit of the gospel instead of the word. You know, like make sure it feels right.
Yeah, pretty
much. And actually, this is interesting. My grandpa was Leroy Johnson, who was the prophet
before
Rulon.
Rulon?
Yeah, before Warren's father.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of where the ingrainment of my family came from, and that was a very much of a decent, like if men like him would have, it'd still be alive and flourishing today if men like him was the leader. But Warren made some mistakes. Mm-hmm. Costed him his abilities, his freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, principles, again, so we've both said the same thing, and I feel like this completely. There's so many things that I was taught as a kid that served me. So many things. There's things that my parents taught me because that's what they were taught, and their parents were taught, and their parents were taught, but whether it was brainwashing or not, it served me. It kept me out of drugs and alcohol and being addicted to those things. It kept me out of the party scene, the crazy party scene. It kept me, away from a lot of bad things. Yeah, that could have led me down a whole different path in life. It gave me a perspective that, hey, you know what? Don't be a giver, but also give to society. Be a contributor. Be a supporter of a community. And maybe less structured than yours, but still in the same idea that provide value for the world. Don't be a taker. Nothing is given to you, just freely. Like everything is earned. And so there was a lot of just good principles and things learned there that I think do serve me. What's happened over 200 years is I think we've gotten back to this law of Moses and some things where we just like, here's the real rule that God put there, I think. But let's put this rule in front of this rule, in front of this rule, in front of this rule. So we never break this one, but we got 6 layers deep. So we never get here.
And I share the same opinion on that, but I have a little perspective on a different perspective on why, when things get bigger, they have to conform. So if the downfall of the FLDS started, in my opinion, after Father joined it, after my dad joined it, which was like nobody was joining, nobody was adding perspective to that community. So there's no other way than to go down. And the smaller the group, the tighter you can be. It's a lot like my family watches NFL, and part of them were bitching about how it's gotten soft, how people aren't able to hurt or to hit
targeting
people, tackle
the quarterback. And
the truth of it is, it's because it's so big and there's so many eyes on it nowadays.
They're assets, so they have to protect their assets.
Exactly. So it's not like one player can get hurt and they'll just get railed all over their by their fans.
Right.
Because everybody's seen it and it's a big deal. It's the same thing. The bigger you get, the more you have to conform to society, to what the individuals of the group want to do.
Right.
And I think it's law of nature, really, if you think about it that way.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, that actually is an interesting perspective. I think one of the things that both of the churches did well in was being industrious and making a lot of money. For sure. If there's churches that go under, I think it is maybe a little bit easier if a church goes off the ground to make money because they're tax-free usually.
Yeah. I'd like to see what they do if they don't have the money they have.
What's that?
I'm just saying, like, pull the money away and see what they do.
Yeah.
See what the leaders do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, in the LDS church right now, what do they say, $300 billion, I think, with cash flowing assets. And, I mean, I don't know what they generate in revenue, but it's got to be an insane number. It's growing.
Yeah. There was an article. I don't follow it. I mean, I love the business principles that religion teaches us. I love that aspect, and I have high respect for religious leaders that can make a profit. Like it's principles. It's like follow what they're doing, and you'll get there.
Dude, that's so weird. It's interesting because I was just talking to my wife about this. Like, it was either last night or the night before. I was like, you know what? One thing that I think is admirable about the non-denoms is they treat it more like a mastermind, where it's just minds getting together to think about religion. When you have ultimate truth claims, it takes that and puts it in a different perspective. So, for instance, if you say an ultimate truth claim saying that we are the only true church on the face of the earth, now you've made it black and white. There has to be truth there. You either are the only one, you've separated yourself, because everybody else, like hundreds and thousands of other churches, I don't know how many, are saying we have the priesthood, we're the only true church, and everybody else is bogus. Well, they can't all be right, though, because that claim in and of itself is saying we're the only one, right? But the non-denoms, they're not. They're just saying, hey, we just want to learn about God and Jesus.
Yeah, we just want to, like follow what we feel like is morally right. Like, let people live. I off camera, I spoke about a group that I'm a part of in Vegas, a CEO of group, and the leader of that group is actually a pastor that 35 years ago he was partnered. I call it partner, and he calls it partner nowadays because he learned about business. He partnered up with somebody, and they created their own church, and it's that kind you're talking about, non-denom or whatever. And he is one of the most wisdom-filled men I know. It's like he grew. That church was doing 0 to 30+ million in 30 years, just off people donating, because mastermind. I love that perspective. That's really cool. But that's really what he is.
It's a religious mastermind, right? Yeah. Like, if that's what you want to get better at, then here come we're going to be around grapevines that think about religion.
Exactly.
And I like how you put it too. Like, when you get big, I don't know how you said it, but like, when you get big, things just change.
You have to conform to
conform
to society. There's no other way. I mean, it's self-explosion if you don't.
I think on record there's around 16, 17 million members. Now, that doesn't mean they're active in the LDS.
Right.
But that's still relatively very small.
But imagine, like, you talk about declaration, and I'm not defending the idea that blacks can't hold priesthood. I love a lot of black people, and I have a lot of mentors that are black. But why did that happen? My opinion, it was getting too big to ignore.
Yeah. Yep.
Had to.
They're making too much money, probably. And
well, how in a society could any sizable organization ignore the fact that blacks can and are equal?
Right.
In a lot of ways. You can't ignore it.
No.
When you're that big. So, there's the reason why you have the declaration.
You know what's interesting too is that there's actually, according to some sources that I've read, there's no real proof that Joseph Smith ever said anything about the black people couldn't hold the priesthood in our church.
Yeah.
It usually came from Brigham Young. And that's kind of where it started. And then it was ended right around the time when the federal government basically said, hey, like, if you don't, then we're going to come after you.
Yeah, and to defend the LDS and ultimately the FLDS on black, is a lot of the rules and expectations were built before the Civil War. And we all know what...
And it was the culture.
Slavery and all that, yeah.
It was the culture back then.
Yeah, and so a lot of the foundation of those two churches was built before the Civil War, and before then all the blacks were slaves.
I agree.
So that culture created the rules that they were living by.
I agree. I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard to look back at some of the things that early prophets said and you go, ooh, that was a little crazy sometimes. Yeah. Is because, one, we don't understand the culture. And then the other piece of it we've talked about, they're men. They're human. They are human, trying to do the best that they can in the culture. But do they have bias? Absolutely they do. They were raised by a mom and a dad just like we were. You know what I'm saying? Like, they had people that influenced them and the way they thought. And then they maybe formed some of it in their own soundtracks themselves. But their culture, where they lived, what part of the world they lived in, and their mom and their dad and their aunt and their uncle and their grandma and grandpa, that all has a play into how they're going to respond to certain things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I spoke to my mother still believing in the religion that Warren in the FLDS, and it was pounded into her from her birth.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are that way. Like, a lot of people that were over, 45, 50, well, I would say more like 50, by the time it came undone in 2014, 2015, are still just dominant there, because that's just what was ingrained to them so long. Luckily, I had a lot of relatives that got out before then that gave me perspective. So I had perspective growing up all the time that I doubted it a lot, growing up, the religion itself, especially because a lot of people didn't get any attention from the leaders, and so, like, you'll find that the group, the society that didn't get any personal attention from the leaders seemed to go out on their own.
Yeah. That's interesting. When you said that, there was a lot of things that you didn't buy as a kid, I was the opposite. I was all in. My solo, we mentioned off camera that you listen to one of my solos, and one of those solos that you guys can look up is me talking about homeschooling. And I think in that solo, I kind of mentioned that in some ways I felt like I was a member of the FLDS in the sense that I was kind of sheltered more from what my friends were. If you can think of it, I was homeschooled in my like in a very religious community. All my friends were the same member of my church. My mom and dad were my main teachers. I had one friend that was a homeschool kid too down the street that his mom would sometimes mentor us in a few things that she was good at. And so in my mind, it's a version maybe in some ways. And I felt like I can see now looking back, there's some things I think most things serve me, but there's some things that I would change. And I think that's probably every person's childhood, but, the way that I am today about all of that and how I was raised. And I'm curious to know your thought on it too. If the LDS church is the only true church on the face of the earth,
I'm screwed.
There's a lot of people that would be, right? Which we actually don't believe that anyway. We actually believe in work for the dead and all this, and everybody will just accept it later on, which is a whole nother topic that we won't get into.
Right. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's good. I like it. Then, and if after the split, and even before that God really did appear to Joseph Smith and give him eventually the Book of Mormon, helped him translate it, and everything after. If that all is true, because it either is
or
it isn't, simple. Well, then by challenging it and asking questions, but in the right heart and frame of mind that, hey, Heavenly Father, like I'm realizing that I was born in this, that I was indoctrinated into it, that and I really just want to follow you and know what you want for me. Then if it was the only one and only true church on the face of the earth and I'm questioning it, wouldn't I just land back there anyway? Because my heart is, I want to be where you want me to be. And if you want me to be here, wouldn't I just land back here? And so I think my whole point in all of this is, I'm not trying to tell any of my listeners, go get excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church. Yeah. I'm not saying people that may be listening to their FLDS saying, go quit being a member of the FLDS Church. I'm simply saying the principle that I feel like is the most safe for human beings on the face of this earth with imperfect people trying to start religions is that you have to think for yourself. Because we all, in my opinion, are entitled to personal revelation, and we should be able to question it, because if it is the only true church on the face of the earth, you would land back there if your heart is right and you're trying to do it the right way. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, totally. In that sense, you absolutely would. I love that perspective.
I want to hear yours, though.
I would add to that, though, is I think that I'm not atheist by any means, but I've had a lot of, you may say, religion trauma in my lifetime. So how can I take the lessons of the past of being a part of a religion, not live in the past, but take the lessons of the past? I'm obviously who I am today because of the experiences that I've went through and how I went through them, how I chose to go through them. So how can I take the principles of the past and put them in practice and put them in repeat? A lot of the principles that religion teaches are so similar between every religion. And I'm not only talking LDS, FLDS. I think there's an arrogance that's a part of the LDS and FLDS because they were founded so short time ago. And when you're talking religion, 200 years is a very short time.
Agreed.
So there's still that arrogance. And I think given another 100 years, the LDS ain't going to have that arrogance. They're going to be more like the Christians and the Christians, the Catholics church. I mean, the laws that religion are based off are laws of nature. And that's the way I look at it. And I think if you followed what you truly individual, and this has been my experience, and that's why I'm speaking of it this way. I'm not trying to tell anybody to do anything different than what they feel like is right for them, but I like to say that the right and wrong is perspective between each person. Like, your right may not be my right, your wrong may not be my wrong. One thing for true is you can't injure people, and you can't do them wrong, and you have to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't those two things be the only obvious right and wrong? Everything besides that
can be gray.
Nature can control everything. I mean, nature controls everything. It's, if someone's being dishonest, they get taken to the cleaners.
Yeah.
Some call it karma. It's a law of nature.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that it's I don't really view it as like you'll come back more or less. And I know that's not the point you were trying to make, but you'll just continue because you're at the point that you're trying to follow your own inspiration, and you're questioning what everybody wants you to do, the society in general wants you to do, is you just following the law of nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that'll ever do anybody wrong.
In the way that I look at that, and I think this is came from my upbringing, is like universal laws, right? And you're saying law of nature, universal laws. To me, they're synonymous. Universal laws have always existed, and we just get the agency to choose whether we want to fight against them or just accept them as it's like gravity. Try and fight that.
Yeah.
It's a universal law that's going to happen.
You're going to break a leg or something.
There's no way to, right? And not on this planet. And I just feel like, again, I have so many LDS people that are probably listening to this right now. I think a lot of LDS people do feel the same way. I do. I truly believe that there's so many people in my generation, our generation, not our parents' generation, that feel like, hey, there's a few things that maybe I don't jive with. That's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to burn it all. You can still keep a perspective that, hey, some of this does serve me. Some of this is good. It's made me who I am. But I don't have to believe, and this is a real life example, where me and my dad differed. One time he said, hey, you can't go have picnics on Sunday, because there was a prophet early on that said no picnics on Sunday. And I said, you got to be kidding. Is there really a prophet that, Dad, we go to your house every Sunday and we have dinner together. What's the difference from doing it outside and inside? Is it the driving to your house versus driving out in nature? Well, that can't be. Is it the fact that we're having food? Well, that can't be, because we're having food either way. Is it the fact that we're together? Well, that can't be, because we're either way. I said, what is it that's bad about having a picnic on a Sunday? The prophet said it. Show it to me. I'll find it. And he sure did. He shot me a text message, and it said right there, and I can't remember what prophet. I could ask my dad and I'll give it to you. But it's true. He verified it on the church's website. And I said, my response back to him was, Dad, that may have been a prophet that you were alive for in your day, but I wasn't. And personally, I just think that is the biggest load of bull crap I've ever heard. The point to me, the principle to me, was that we're trying to build family memories and experiences, and we're getting together. Why wouldn't God want us to do that on a Sunday? That's how I looked at it.
Yeah. I think that each and every point that you brought up about, not varying from the religion more or less, but varying from the doing exactly what they say.
The letter of the law.
The letter of the law. The way that I've seen that every point you brought was just valid and had a law of nature behind it. Like, why wouldn't you get out in nature And we were preached that a lot too. Like Sunday, you were at home. You were at home.
You're reading your scriptures. You're with your family, doing nothing. No TV, no nothing.
3 or 4. Like for me in my childhood, we had Sunday school at 8:00 in the morning. We had a singing class after that.
That's evil for the moms to get all their kids ready for the. You guys have a lot of kids out there. Like, let's just be honest. And then you got to get all those kids ready for church at 8:00. That's tough. Those poor moms is all I got to say.
Sunday school was in your own house, though. So
and
there
that's
was some
after
forgiveness there.
Or Sunday school was at 8.
Yeah, Sunday school's at 8 a.m. in the morning.
In your house.
Was at your house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some few people would go to their dads or their grandpas and do it, but not very often. We had Sunday schools, and then at 11:00 we had like a singing class, whatever, or singing. And then we had church at 2, lasted till 4, and then obviously the evening prayers. So Sundays were full.
It was a full day.
Yeah, if you did something on Sunday, you were obviously wicked because you missed out on
you were
all this
playing
stuff.
hooky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting hickeys or something.
That didn't happen, did it?
Not in my lifetime, and I'm ashamed of it too. So
you're ashamed that it didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm ashamed. I didn't get to feel all that stuff out when I was young. It's actually my biggest beef. If you got my emotions about that religion, it's my biggest beef.
Is it the dating?
Is the dating and the sex aspect. How much that, like, you knew your parents were in that room going after it, and then they come out and say it's the wickedest thing you could do, and don't teach you a damn thing about it. Like, if you got my emotions and anger about it, that's it. Like, everything else I can actually put a principle to. And when I say principle, I don't mean the letter of the law, like the principle of why it was said. Every other aspect, except for the sex aspect, I don't have a problem with that religion.
Were they just talking about like before marriage though? Because in LDS religion, it's the same thing. And in a lot of other religions, it's like, hey, no sex before marriage. Was it that?
No, it like I can understand that. Like I'm with my only one. Like I'm my wife is one I lost my virginity to. So like I can understand the aspect of don't do anything. Like why would you want to do anything? Like you have the chance of having a baby with someone that you don't want. That you don't know if you don't want to have a baby with. Like I get that it's fun, but
yeah. We like doing it. But yeah, it makes sense that it's safer to be able to do it.
But no, it's the fact that it was so. I one time asked when I was thinking about leaving. I asked one of my good friends that was older that got married 3 times in the religion, had 3 different wives, and I says, "Was you taught anything about sex? Like, is there a class or something you go through when they first marry you? Because in our religion, at least when I was alive, back before my time, then you could go date somebody and then request to be married to him. It didn't guarantee it, but you could request it. I asked him, I says, do they teach you? He says, no, I knew nothing about it other than you watch animals do it all day, literally. You know,
there's no birds and the bees talk whatsoever.
No, not at all. Like there is if your parents are normal, like if your parents will realize that they need to talk to you.
But was that
for
rare?
The most part? No, nobody did.
Okay.
Very few people would talk about the birds. And the bees.
There was no handbook.
No,
there was no anything like that. See, in the LDS church, there's something called True to the Faith, and the only thing that it really does, and in some good ways, I think that it's. The church tries to stay out of the bedroom a little bit, which may be a good thing. 'Cause I think there can be a lot of guilt and shame there. But where it, I think, is not healthy is we don't talk about it at all, and then there's just a lot of confusion, right? And so, and then a lot of just unrealistic expectations.
Well, I don't want to necessarily say that like I'm mad at them for not talking about it, other than the effects of not talking about it. So at least my growing up, I don't know how yours was. It was so avoided, more than punished. It was so avoided that naturally it's just like, it's wicked. Like, you don't know anything,
Yeah.
but then your body's natural still. It's like your body does weird shit, and you think you're wicked or whatever the case is growing up, because puberty hits when you're 12, and that's way too young to start talking about everything.
Yeah. And it's different for a male than it is for a female, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit of screwing around with your mind. I think it puts a lot of people in a bad state of mind.
I agree.
Because all those hormones going around, and then you're trying to bottle them all up, and
I agree.
That's the way I don't like it. Is what it caused.
I agree. I'm gonna step out on a limb, and I don't care whether people judge me for saying this or not. Yeah, I am who I am, and I'm gonna say what I want to say, and that just is. Yeah. If you don't like my opinion, go listen to somebody else's podcast. My opinion on masturbation. Yeah. What's better? For a young man who has just natural sexual desires, for him to go privately in his bedroom, take care of it without pornography, without another girl, without another person, or to bottle it up, to hold it in, to have what we've been told in the church is to let the factory, is what was named, that it's a factory. So there's Boyd K. Packer came out, and I read it. My dad gave it to me when I was going through puberty. Hey, that you're basically, when you ejaculate, have a wet dream, then that's just your factory, is what we're going to call it, just naturally letting go and doing its thing. And that's the way that God intended it, is only that way. And I'm like, as a kid, I'm like, okay. And then, was I perfect in that? No. Were most boys, in my opinion? No. I would feel confident in saying that over 90% of men at some point played around with it, because it's your body, because it feels good, because you're going to figure it out. And then when you do, like to your point, oh, I'm wicked. Oh, this was wrong. Well, it felt good, so that is like this huge pleasure, but I got this huge shame over here. Yeah. And they don't go well together.
Exactly. And
it can be an addiction, though, too, so I'm careful with what I'm saying. Right. To wrap it all together, to wrap it together, I just feel like, what's healthier? If you bottle it up, you're creating bigger problems.
I think the worst part of talking about masturbation is the image it creates. Talking about masturbation, and I'm being funny. I'm trying to be funny. If you're over there talking about masturbation, just that image is just like, nah. But no, seriously, to me, your body, like, it's nature. Like, your body needs to do something, needs to release something. It needs that whatever, and if you don't have a lady to go hunky-dory on, then take care of yourself.
And you don't want that to happen. There's actually an LDS therapist, sex therapist, that came out and said that all the studies that she's ever done over the decades is that masturbation for men is about as strong as a desire as the urge to eat. Think about that. If you've ever done a 3-day fast or a 7-day fast, go past 24 hours, you don't have as strong of urge because you burn all the glucose. Yeah. But at some point, you're going to have an urge. And then that urge is going to get stronger because you need to eat. Yeah. So I'm not saying that you need it every day when I say that, to be clear. I'm saying at some point, there's going to be an urge.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty accurate for all the females listening to this.
I agree, and I don't think it's a thing to be shamed about.
I think you can be mature about it. I think you can. I think you can teach kids. I think that a lot of the problem is that the parents think that by teaching their kids about this stuff, they're making it normalized and they're encouraging them to go deeper and deeper into it. I disagree. And I've heard and heard from professionals on this, and I agree with them, is that, and in fact, they're LDS too.
Yeah.
So it's coming from my own religion professionals that study this topic. By telling the kids how it is, you're actually relieving them of the curiosity.
Yeah.
You're telling them what it is, and they're not going to go get false information from their friends.
Well, one of the things that so you spoke earlier about, like, you were talking about other people's beliefs, your listeners, whatever. It's easy to convince people to understand you if you know how to do it.
Mm.
And like telling people that are in a religion, like, you don't have to just come up and say you're in a cult. You know, like, that's going to rub anybody wrong that believes that cult, so to speak. Mm. Talk to them about why you think that way. You know, talk to them, go into feeling, get some feeling involved, and talk to them why you feel that way. Like, what's this? Like, you spoke earlier about, like, show me why it's wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, show me why going on a picnic on Sunday is wrong. To that same point, what if our parents, in my case, my parents, would come to me and say, look, this is what you're going to deal with. Mm-hmm. This is how I went through it, like, and this is where I could have done better. It's just what's going to happen. You know, so it's not about being told, it's how you're told. Yeah. You know, and put some feeling in there. That feels good. Yeah. You know, like, and I think it's a natural stress reliever, and I don't talk about it because the image is not there. But
it's true. I think at the end of the day that God created that for a reason. I think we've misconstrued it over time. I'm not saying that we have to highlight it and put it on billboards. I'm just saying that it needs to be something talked about, just the same as having a conversation about faith, mm-hmm. about charity, about loving your neighbor, all these other ideas and principles that are good. Why is it something that we look at as never talked about, or talked about one, like we talk about the birds and the bees talk, which I never got, by the way.
Really?
Never did. And I, as a one-time thing.
How did you know it wasn't the belly button then? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know, huh? That was off camera, but yeah, there are people that believe that that's the case. That the hole is the belly button.
Conversation wasn't off camera. That was on your, what was it?
Well, before we were talking about it, but yeah, Keith Yackey, we were talking about that.
That's a great episode.
He's got a really cool perspective. It's different for sure. And so, anyway, my opinion is, like, do I think a little bit different than the traditional way that I was raised? I think so, but I still think you can. And I think you still can think that way and still hold true to a lot of the good principles that are there. Because a lot of the other stuff, in my opinion, should be challenged, has not been challenged, and should be challenged. I think a lot of people are unhappy with them anyway and are starting to see it, but nobody wants to talk about it. And it goes back to where we started. We don't challenge those things because it was said by a prophet and prophets are infallible, or something like that. It's written in stone. It doesn't change. It's doctrine. Bull crap, in my opinion.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of peer pressure? I'm sure that was that. To me, that was every other word in our religion. Don't give, like, going through school. Don't give in to peer pressure. Mm. Tell me I'm wrong when I say that most staunch LDS and FLDS parents are constantly giving into peer pressure of their society.
Mm. Just in a way that they don't see.
Yeah, they can't see it because they think. But why wouldn't you do something? What do you do in your bedroom? Would you do it in front of your neighbors? And I'm not saying sexual stuff. I'm just saying, like, what videos do you watch? Sure. You know, stuff like that. What would you do in your own home that you don't do in front of your neighbors? There's a lot of
things that I wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's peer pressure. I think it's given into the pressures of society.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't like.
Yeah, you're conforming for sure. I had somebody the first time I ever heard this, and man, we've been going a long time. This is fun. This to me is fun. So we need to wrap this up here pretty soon. But one of the things that I remember is at 14, somebody asked me, it was a mentor of mine at 14. And he said, how much of the way that you talk, walk, dress is influenced by your peers? And I really tried to be honest with it at 14. I'm glad I did. I still remember this. I remember where I was, remember kind of the thought process behind it. And I was like, God, at first I started like 70%, 80%, 90%. And I was like, gosh, it's like 100%. As I got more and more honest with myself. And that hit me pretty early on at 14. And I've gone through waves of my life where I think, God, am I doing this because I want to do it, or is it because I think other people will see me a certain way?
Yeah.
Is it because I like it? And that's hard to distinguish, man. It really is, at least for me. Is it because I like it? Because a lot of the things that we do in general anyway are because we see somebody else do it first. And so how do we know? Is it like, is it just because I want to look like them and look cool, or is it because I like it?
Well, even when you change from doing that one thing that you've been doing, is because you've seen someone else do
something different.
Something different, so you want to do that. But no, I think societal pressure is real.
I agree.
Especially in religion.
So choose your friends wisely, which we kind of talked about. Now, I think it's probably a good place to end because, and we haven't even talked about money, but that's okay. I like that these things just go where they naturally go. Yeah, I like just that we jam.
This has gone different than I anticipated, but I love it. It's been good.
Yeah, but I think the one thing that we can maybe bring back, and I think this was still off camera before, but you started talking about, hey, like, being around bigger minds, bigger thinkers, and some of that was on camera, but being around people that think bigger with bigger numbers. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I think that's important in every aspect of life. It's not just numbers, right? And I think you would agree. In every pillar and area of your life, just be around. The cool thing about being an adult is you get to choose now who your people are. In fact, you even get to choose whether you want to be around your family. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's okay to say. If your family's acting up, you don't have to associate with them. There's no rule that says that you have to. If they're messing you up and they're bad energy and they drain your battery, cut off. Right. That's just how it goes.
The old adage that family is everything, I think is correct, but it has to do with your own family, mm-hmm. who you committed to, and who you brought into.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be blood all the time.
Onto the earth. I went years without seeing most of my brothers, and even still today, when I don't have the religious barrier there, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I got my own world.
Yeah.
I'm creating my own world. I hope I'm an example to them.
That's super cool. That's super cool. So go create your world with people that think big. I think the other thing, the lesson that I've learned is vibe out your vibe. Like who you are, just let it be authentic. Oh, don't hide it, because your vibe attracts your tribe. And if you don't vibe it, you'll never attract it. Yeah. And so then you're constantly just feeling alone, or you're not around people that you want to be around.
Yeah. When I first came in, I never met Eric before I first came in. You notice I called you Guy. I says, hi, Guy. That was my way of just like breaking the ice, be authentic. Like I didn't call you by your name. I think, hello, sir, so-and-so. That's just, it's too formal.
Yeah.
Hi, Guy. So I agree with that whole bunch. Just be authentic.
Yeah. Be you.
Make people think you're weird. It's fun.
Yeah.
When people think you're weird, it's fun.
Yeah. If that's what you want to do. Again, it goes back to be authentic, because that's the only thing that is really unique about you is you.
Yeah.
So this has been fun, dude. I never knew that I would have a podcast, an episode like this.
It's not what I expected.
Not me either.
I'm glad we had it.
Even when we sat down and we kind of hashed out before this, I didn't see it going this way, but it's been fun. So thanks for coming in, man. It's been a good time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Eric.
Hey, if you guys feel like this has been of value to you, share it, get it out there, share it with as many people as you can. And we appreciate you guys always listening and staying committed to these things. Just know you can reach out at any time. You're also starting your podcast, or have started it soon. Where do they find you?
Yeah, Build Beyond with TecTon. I don't think we have any episodes out here in the coming weeks. It will.
It's like January 16th, 2024, but anytime in the next few weeks after that, you'll see some episodes. So if you're coming in late, you can expect some coming out. So, hey, so scratch all of that. You can go to figure out where his podcast is and go follow him and his podcast and go listen to some of his episodes. So, guys, appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening and always listening and sharing this with people. I really do appreciate you guys and everybody that reaches out. I think about you a lot, actually. I think about people that are following me and the podcast and my social media. And I think all the time, how can I just try to do my best to be authentic to me and share my message and what I feel like I've learned, and then bring on the best guests possible. And so hopefully I've done that. And I appreciate you guys listening this far. We'll see you in the next one.